Because one of the priority of the junta, of the military government, actually was to depoliticize every aspect, any aspect of society and daily life, in order to prevent any further inclination toward rebellion and chaos. So the persecution of terrorists soon turned into the persecution of potentially anyone who was even only slightly interested, slightly engaged in politics. Mass imprisonment became, for sure, the major tool by which the police came to silence dangerous people on behalf of the police. And as I said, this large-scale imprisonment came to involve not only political activists and people who were somehow engaged in radical movements and illegal activities, but also potentially anyone, any ordinary citizen who somehow supported some ideologies who were not in line with the militarist view, especially, of course, leftist ideologies. Here there are some data on the military rule. I'm not going to read all of them, but this is just to give you an idea of the extent of the persecution that was put in act by the police on behalf of the military. I would just want to stress one thing: 48 death sentences carried out of which 50% were political prisoners. So this is important. We're not talking about criminals, but political prisoners, prisoners of thought. And turning to the second part, to culture and the media, of course we can say that predictably this depolitization mission came to affect also the cultural landscape in a very strong way. First of all, political debates, public debates on politics were forbidden, and censorship became the major tool to repress any attempt to criticize the army, criticize the military as rulers, and criticize, of course, the police. In this way, in this period, books, movies, novels, TV programs, and newspapers, etc., were subject to strict censorship. In many cases, their authors were also imprisoned, and in some cases, they were also forced into self-exile. Meanwhile, the state media, like the only television channels that were available at the time, and the radio channels, came, of course, under the control of the junta and began to promote this highly positive image of the police, the image of a police hero who is rescuing the country from devastation, the image of the police as guardians who are protecting the interests of the country and of the nation. Now, obviously, there is a large number of examples that I could make about media who began to promote this very positive idea of the military. Anyhow, in the mainstream media, to criticize the regime and to criticize the police, at the same time dealing with censorship. And from here, we move to the only exception that comes out in this mainstream media of Turkey in the 80s, that is the satirical magazine Gırgır. Gırgır was and still is a weekly satirical magazine that was founded in 1972 by a very famous cartoonist. Initially, it was not dealing with politics. It was more promoting a satire based on sexual sketches and sexual jokes. However, throughout the 70s, Gırgır became more and more political, and by the year of the military coup, it was definitely a political magazine, a magazine of political satire. So, during the military regime, Gırgır began to portray in the cartoons and in the written satirical columns the problem and the general crisis that, in the way how society was perceiving it, at least. Yes, I think at this point it's also important to say that Gırgır was extremely popular. It was for sure the most popular and appreciated satirical magazine in Turkey. It was also the best-selling among all the weekly magazines in Turkey, not only among the satirical ones. And at some point, between the end of the 70s and the early 80s, it became also the third best-selling satirical magazine in the world. The first one was an American magazine called Mad, the second was Crocodile, a Soviet one, and the third was Gırgır. So we can now move to the third part, and I would like to show you some examples of cartoons. Let's say that I have found out three main strategies through which these cartoons criticize the police. Under each of these strategies we can find other trends and sub-trends, so I will try to give you an example for each trend. So there is a first group of cartoons that target the police exactly by showing portraying policemen, police officers explicitly. These police officers are represented in two ways, basically. One is during interrogations. So during interrogations we see policemen who are just performing their duties. Now I picked up this caricature, which is quite interesting for many reasons. I cannot, of course, tell all the interesting aspects of it, but I will just briefly translate it maybe. One of the two men is asking the interrogated guy to is just saying, please just don't, let's cut it short, it's very warm here, tell us where your friends are hiding. And the other guy, the interrogated guy, is smiling and says they are hiding in the Turkish bath of the Arabian desert under the springs of hot water. So the idea is we are all sweating. It's completely crazy to spend more time here, but I don't care. I'm not afraid of you, and I can mock you. And this is one. The other way in which policemen were explicitly portrayed is while they were torturing interrogated people. Like in this one, we have a very scared guy who possibly is a political prisoner, someone who doesn't really have the aspect of a criminal. He's being asked one question, he doesn't reply, so they literally plug him into the electricity plug, and so he starts speaking, basically broadcasting some like the news as if he were a radio channel. So the focus here is on the use of electricity shocks to make people speak. Also here we have the same thing of a policeman who is getting out from a room where he has just interrogated someone, and only when he smells the smell of something burning he realizes, oh my god, I forgot the prisoner plugged in, basically. There is a second group of cartoons. The second strategy, I mean, is the one according to which the distinction between policemen and military officers is not made clear. My hypothesis is that this is made intentionally. The fact that the distinction between the two identities is quite blurred. I think this was also a reaction to condemn the police and the military at the same time together, and basically for the same reasons. So there were two main ways in which the identity between police and military became blurred. One was at visual level, and the other one was a performative level. Here we have a visual level, mainly consists in creating some ambiguity in the appearance of the uniforms. Like in this case, we could think probably this is a military officer, but at the same time it's not really clear whether it could be also a policeman. In this case, the guy is just saying, we don't want the war, we don't want to fight, and it's just, he's so naturally violent that just a missile just coming out from his mouth. Here again, possibly a military officer, but maybe not, we're not sure. We have this officer, also the Turkish word komutan could be applied both to the military and to the police, so doesn't really solve the ambiguity. Komutan, who is full of complexes because he's short-hated, so he every time that he has to give orders to a subordinate, he pretends to jump on the shoulder of someone else in order to look bigger. So we are facing an arrogant man full of complexes, and at the same time quite comic and ridiculous. A performative level, as I was saying, this is a technique that takes place mostly in the cartoons from prison, and we see these prison guards who could be either policemen or military. I say that because, well, in general, during the regime, it was the army who was in charge of the prisons. I mean, the gendarmerie, so part of the armed forces. But at the same time, we have some cartoons here where we have these prison guards wearing a truncheon. So that would be for sure the police. Now, okay, in this cartoon we are seeing this. This cartoon is announcing the fact that prisons are overcrowded, as I said before, because of mass imprisonment. So the only way to let some prisoners have a walk is just to hold them by a rope, basically as if they were dogs. Here again we have a guy, a man who is getting anxious because he wants to get into prison, and he said, "I can't believe that there's no place for me. I booked 3 months in advance. It's not possible." And the idea again is that it became so ordinary to get to prison that it came to seem almost like a holiday, like a trip. Here again we are in prison, and we have these 4 prisoners who are trying to sunbathe a little bit, and the only way to do that is to jump on the shoulders of one of each other. And we have a guardian who is just staring at them, and in a way he seems also quite sympathetic toward them, because it's not saying that they have to quit or that they shouldn't do that. Yeah, and also here we have another officer who seems quite sympathetic with the prisoner again. The prisoner has just left prison, and as soon as he gets out from the prison door, he feels as if he couldn't breathe, because he was not used to freedom anymore, and because probably spent so much time in the prison cell that it will take a long time to adapt again to freedom and to normal life. They are just there representing power in general. The problem is that these cartoons are denouncing stands above them. It's the problem of mass imprisonment, of spending long time in prison, maybe without a fair trial, etc. But it's not the police officers who are represented here who are guilty of something in these cartoons, and this is quite interesting and important. We'll go back to that. Again, another one, the guy is showing the corner where cartoonists are being taken into custody, meaning that, of course, also intellectuals and cartoonists can go to prison for apparently no reason or for political reasons, etc. And then we move to other prison guards who, contrary to the other one, were just passively fulfilling their task. These new prison guards that we have here are explicitly on the side of the junta, on the side of the regime and of the repression. Here we have on the right two prisoners who are getting to jail. These are 2 unionists, and of course they're getting in there. They have been just arrested. At the same time, on the left, we have 2 or 3 mafia men who are getting out, and the guy in the middle, the police officer, says, "Yes, I'm glad you're going out, otherwise you couldn't stay all in the same room, otherwise you would spoil the morality of these poor unionists." But at the same time, of course, it's unionists who are being arrested, and it's the mafia men who are being released. We have, of course, these prison directors, again, who could be either police representatives or military or civil ones. And in this case, we see a police director who is inviting 3 students to join prison, because, as we can see from the writing on the back, possibly these guys were looking for a place to stay, to rent, and all the students' houses are full. So the fact that really randomly people could get into prison. And then there is a third strategy, which is the one according to which policemen, neither policemen nor the military are represented. They are just evoked and strongly accused. Like in this cartoon, we have this street seller who apparently should be selling fruit and vegetables in the street, but who instead is selling drugs, like heroin, cocaine. So, of course, we are denouncing the issue of drug smuggling and drug use, but at the same time, the cartoon hits the police insofar as it is showing that the streets are not safe now that the police and the military are in power, because there was this idea of saying we have to make the streets safe again, we have to take people back in the streets without fear. So apparently this is not a police cartoon, but I think this is very interesting and clever. Normalization of torture, again, we don't see any policeman, any police representative here, but we have a guy who is going to buy some shoes in a shoe store, and he's getting afraid at a simple question that would be just related to the size of his foot, as it is suggested by the first scene. And this is just to say that torture had become routine. There were so many cases of torture that were happening that anybody could have fear of that in any moment. Normalization of torture and normalization of prisoners' death. Speechless, captionless cartoon, no people, but of course we see that many footprints are getting into this prison or police station, we don't know exactly, but at the same time just a few of them will be able to come out and to survive. Again, prisoners who are getting ready to be hanged, because we shouldn't forget that capital punishment still existed in Turkey at the time, and it was quite likely that during the regime people were being tried under military tribunals, and the decision on their destiny was completely arbitrary. And then the last point, oppressors in power. Oppressors, yes, I decided to talk about oppressors, meaning both military officers as military officers as authorities, and the police, of course. So here we see the authority who is accusing a random person, person, but that without giving him the opportunity to reply, to defend himself. So yes, we can see that in these cartoons the police is represented or is attacked in a great variety of ways. We have many different contexts in which the police is represented. We have every time a negative image of the police, which changes all the time. So we have ridiculous, desperate, absent-minded, violent, arrogant policemen, etc. Of course, yes, the heroic image of the police is completely denied here, and the thing I was telling you before, the fact that low-rank officers and police prison guards are represented in a slightly more positive way compared to the police officers who are taking out questionings and torture. I think this is a very interesting fact, and I didn't work on that right before this conference. And my hypothesis right now is that in some way the cartoonists of Gırgır were aware of the fact that low-rank police officers, policemen, were not necessarily convinced that these repressive measures and authoritarian attitude of the regime would be the solution, would be the right way to deal with violence. So I think that in some way these cartoonists might have wanted to redeem the position and the faults of these low-rank officials, deeming them in a way only a minor pawn in the big game of the military government. last point, yes, turning to the relationship between the regime and Gırgır. Of course, we have seen that the police is hardly represented in a positive way in these cartoons, and the police myth is attacked in many different levels, but every time in an official level, in an efficient level, I think. And as you can imagine, the police themselves had no real mean to stop or to prevent these cartoons from being published. But at the same time, of course, the military regime had the big weapon of censorship, and in fact censorship was used at some point in the summer of 1982 against Gırgır, that was censored and closed down for 4 weeks. Now, compared to other media, 4 weeks doesn't look like a long time, but I would also like to say now that Gırgır was a magazine that never accepted sponsors, never accepted advertisements, so it was financing itself only through the sales. And for this reason, even such a short time, like 4 weeks, could mean, and did actually mean, a big financial loss for the magazine. And what is interesting then is that after 4 weeks, when the magazine came back on the market, it recorded the best-selling record ever. As I said before, Gırgır was extremely popular, and it was selling very well also before. We're talking about 400,000 copies just before the closure, let's say summer 1982, and soon after it's coming back to the market, the record arrived at 500,000 copies. It was the best sales rate ever. It was really impressive. So this was also a way, I don't have time, I know, a way to show solidarity to the magazine in some way. Yes, I will just conclude black and white answer to this question. Guardians or executioners? The answer is clearly much more complex than this, and also history teaches that between 1980 and 1983, some policemen became guardians, some others became executioners, and some others became both. So I would like to leave this question open right now, and I would just conclude by saying that no matter which policeman became what, no matter who became guardian, who became executioner, we should really recognize without hesitation the merit of Gırgır, the merit of these cartoons, and especially their role in providing an alternative to the official version that was constantly promoted throughout the regime, and also the great merit in fighting the uniformity that the regime was trying to impose on the media. Thank you.